Hey guys, what's up? Swim here. It's been a couple weeks since we've done YouTube guides. I've been setting up the new place, but we're back and we're gonna start pumping out these fresh guide videos for you, starting this week with blacklisting. You guys hear me talk about it on stream in my videos. It's really important, and it recently got a huge change that changes everything about how you're supposed to play with it. So, what is it? So blacklisting is a term I started using in Dota Auto Chess to refer to the mechanic where you no longer see heroes that you recently rerolled. So for example, right now we're in round 1. We have Drow, Bounty, Drow, Shadow Shaman, Bloodseeker. So if we were to see a new shop, either from hitting the manual reroll button or from just like the round going to round 2 and seeing a new shop, the next shop would not be able to contain any of these 4 units: Drow, Bounty, Shadow Shaman, and Bloodseeker. This has pretty immense implications in terms of how play is made. The change that recently was gone through was that this mechanic has always existed, but it used to only apply to manual rerolls. Now it applies to every reroll, which is the automatic shop between rounds. So this ends up having some really major implications in terms of how you should play the game. For example, if we were to buy this Shadow Shaman and then sell this Shadow Shaman, this is already, it looks to a new player like nothing has changed, but it actually has already had a negative impact on the game, because now Shadow Shaman isn't going to be blacklisted. He's not in the shop anymore, which means now when we go to see the next pack, the next shop from the next round, there's a chance we'll see a Shadow Shaman in there, which is not what we want. It's not really an early game unit. It's not really going to do anything for you early, right? So basically, the first step is avoid, buying and selling needlessly. What this means is that overflowing your bench, which is something that a lot of players have gotten into the habit of doing, is actually often having a negative impact on the game, right? Which is very, very strange to kind of wrap your head around at first. You should also note this really applies mostly to the early game scenarios, because in the early game where you can only find like 1 and 2 and maybe 3 cost units, your pool of heroes is going to be lower, so like blacklisting individual heroes is going to have a much more noticeable effect. For example, if we were to basically try to go into round 2 here, after just taking the Warlock, we can just take Warlock because it doesn't diminish the blacklist here. Because we still have Warlock, Shadow Shaman, Ogre, and Anti-Mage. If we were to go into round 2, blacklisting these 4 units, we have actually a pretty significant increase on our chances to get any units that's not these 4, right? So this mostly applies to the first, 10, maybe 15 rounds of the game is kind of the biggest deal here. But what it does mean is don't be overflowing kind of weaker units, or units that you just feel less comfortable playing. An interesting thing to note is that sometimes if you see 5 units in your opening for round 1 that you just don't want to play, in this case Anti-Mage is fairly powerful, not a great example of a unit you wouldn't want to play, but the other 4 are fine for it. If you see all 5 units that you don't want to play, oddly enough, you're incentivized to just blacklist all 5 of them. This is a really, really counterintuitive thing to do, but losing round 1 to the creeps actually doesn't have any impact on the game whatsoever, because it will give you the same item quality and you won't lose any health. And if all 5 units are units you don't want to play, you get an extra unit that's not going to be in your round 2 shop, which is good for you. So yeah, that's blacklisting in its new form in a nutshell. It's a really interesting mechanic that changes the way you think about your shop and you think about your resources. So after this change of blacklisting applying to the automatic between round rerolls, I guess the final question to ask ourselves is, do we think this is a positive change for the game? I actually would probably say no, personally. So there's a chance they might revert it if they, if Valve also agrees. But I think this pushes the game a little bit more in the direction of being constructed instead of draft, if that makes sense. It's kind of better for players that like forcing specific strategies over and over again, but it creates bad incentives in terms of stuff like playing for the bench and trying to keep your path as open as possible. because it disincentivizes stuff like overflowing and stuff like just playing for a wide bench. Where I think in the first like 15 rounds of the game, specifically the first 10, the bench is really, really important because it represents your ability as a player to keep your options as open as you want to keep them. And any limitation on that, I think, is probably going to have a negative influence to the game. So maybe they'll change it back, and in a couple weeks, this video will be completely redundant. Who knows? But, until then, this has been Blacklisting in its current form, and I'll see you guys next time.